We are live with today's pre-show of our N10-009. That's our Network Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello, chat room. Good to see everybody. Thanks for showing up early. Folks already in there saying hi, saying hey, howdy. How y'all doing? All right, things here look pretty good. We can pause that. We're currently getting things together. I'm looking at my recordings. They are running, thankfully. Let's have a look at cameras. All the cameras are working. Finally, we got it. And now I've got all brand new questions for you. So if you're here for the questions, you're in the right place. All new questions. I've got plenty to go through today. We can close a few things on the screen. Oh boy, what a busy week. What a lot. There's a lot going on. It's only Tuesday and we got a lot going on. Sky in the chat room says, I'm taking Network Plus in 2.5 hours. I'm hoping that we give you exactly what you need to walk into that room in this session. It's always good to do a little bit of extra work, a little extra going on there. I need to work on a number of different things here to get everything running. Now, this, of course, is our only live stream this week, but we have our Security Plus live stream next week. So if you want to do Security Plus, you want to come back for that. On my screen, which you can probably see, is a map of the world, a little bit stylized, but I think we can recognize it. And if you'd like to join and put your virtual pin in our digital pin cushion for where you happen to be, look, Malk's here. That's the only person I know down there. It's got to be Malk. It's got to be in the chat room. So we got folks checking in from all over, though. Not just the Caribbean, is that really the Caribbean way out there? I guess technically we call it that. Maybe in North America we call it that. Not sure. Perhaps Malk can tell us, are you really considered the Caribbean? Is it really more part of South America? How do the locals, where do they think they live? I say think they live. Of course they know where they live. So we have to figure that part out. But we've got a lot to go through today. I'm looking forward to this. Get a lot of good stuff going on. Jay in the chat room says, passed my Network Plus with an 827. That's a great score as well. Congratulations. Fantastic. I love hearing stories like that. Just passed. That's got to feel good, right? So now you got the basics. Now we need to work on whatever's next. We've got, oh, you know what? It's getting warm in here. Everything's LED. The temperatures are not quite as bad as they used to be when working through this, but things still get warm. I turn on a lot more equipment when I'm doing a live stream. There's the video switcher has, what's the temperature in here now? The video switcher has heat coming out of it. It's not usually on. I have recorders that are going here, and I don't know if if I open this up, you can kind of hear, I don't know if you can hear the fans or not. Not really. No, they don't even register on this microphone, but there are fans going in there because video is hot. Video is hard to do. Video takes a lot of CPU. So whenever I turn the video stream on, it always tends to increase the temperature. So that's just how it works. We've got a lot going on here. You can see I've got a few changes that I've made in the studio most recently. I need to change my chat just a little bit. One of the things is we have a teleprompter in the front here, which is a little different than we used to do. I don't want top chat. I want live chat. Live. It's live. I don't know that it's that live, but we got it going on. Okay. The last things I need to work on for this, we've got this ready to go. This is ready to go. As many of you recall, our live streams earlier in the month did not have this laptop working properly. Now that I figured out that problem, we are well on our way. We got a lot also to work on here. Someone did accuse me the other day of being AI. I guess I should do something odd. Maybe only have 3 fingers on one hand. I'm not sure how to convince. At that point, how do we convince people that we are not fake? Because it all sounds kind of fake to me. It certainly could be. I say we go with that. We don't know. We'll have to figure out the details. at least we got this going on. 5 minutes to go before we get started. This is our pre-show. So if you have tuned in for the first time, you're wondering, why are we not doing anything yet? Well, it's because I spend the first 10 minutes effectively not doing anything. So this is, I really am doing things. I really am checking and making sure, and this is running, and sort of my last final check. Plus, this is a good chance to at least say hello to the chat room, see how things are going with you guys. This is the way it works. Yeah, I'm glad this is not AI. AI is an awful way to study for an industry exam. Constant incorrect information and out of scope information, and relatively pointless to go that direction. You need smart people around you who can help you with smart problems. This is what thankfully is going to save all of us, quite honestly. The great part about technology is that the less knowledgeable others are, the more knowledgeable you will be by default. It kind of works on that basis anyway. We know that whenever those types of things happen, that we can always work through the details. Okay, next on our list is Network Plus today, next week Security Plus, and then I've already got I need to put the May dates into our calendar, which is not done yet, so I need to work on that as well. What do I think of the Security Plus? This is Sec AI certification. Pretty much what I think of everything AI related. That it's a certification that teaches me on things that don't actually solve any problems for me yet. So I don't think we have to worry too much about that. We're sort of noticing that in the industry. We saw that great, everything's AI, whether it is or not. Here, have this burger made with AI. Here, enjoy your breakfast made with AI. I don't need an AI button for everything. Plus, it doesn't work. That's my whole problem with AI. AI is fantastic until you need it to do something, and then it doesn't do anything. It's a remarkable technology. It is a remarkable set of technologies that they put together. It's basically all development stuff, it seems. They haven't been able to do anything practical with it, at least not from a consumer-facing perspective, but maybe they will. Maybe they'll figure it out. And then we can all say, well, there's where it is. There's all the nonsense. I was trying to get some, I had 2 different tech support tickets I submitted over the last 2 days. None of them have been served or even looked at properly because they have AI sitting in the front of it. So they keep asking the same question over and over and over again, even though you've answered it. It has taken where we used to be and put us at new lows. So I'm confident that us being smarter with technology, us learning these certifications, us becoming more aware of the other technologies around us, effectively will make us more valuable in the workplace. And that is clearly what is happening right now. We just have to wait for all the rest of the companies to figure this out. And they're starting to. We're starting to see that shift away from, let's spend a ridiculous amount of money on this technology. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, we're firing all the AI stuff and we're going back to what we were doing. It's a slow go. It's hard for people to eat so much crow. They're getting there now. They're finally figuring out that it doesn't actually do anything well, but at least not in consumer facing. There are things that a true AI system, especially in the world of security, I talk all the time about the massive amount of data we have on the security side. And AI is extremely valuable for correlating data, large amounts of information, being able to search through and find things that humans simply can't do. Things like medical research, big data. Big data is a perfect thing for AI. Tech support, not so much. Doesn't work really well. So that's our challenge. We're sort of trying to figure it out right now. We're all balancing it. We're all trying to look. And I think calling balls and strikes with AI right now are a good thing to do. It's kind of a U.S. term, but being able to point at and go, yes, that's good. Yes, that isn't, I think is going to be important for us going forward. And I think we're starting to see more right sizing of those pieces. Less than a minute to go before we get started here to see where it goes. I have a lot to go through in this live stream. All stuff working for me. We've got this here. Let me take a sip before we actually go live. Let's put that far enough away that it doesn't fall over into everything else. With that, I think we can see, watch the numbers go to 12. It's top of the hour. That means we could actually do this, right? We could actually go to Keynote. We could look for the green light. Come on, let's get it going. Play. We're going to play that. Very nice. I guess that means we should do a live stream now. It's, how does this work again? We will figure this out. Let's now start her up, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2026 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I'm going to ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and together we will see just how well we happen to know these topics. We have a lot of great information to go through today. Looking forward to stepping through quite a bit of it. And if you are here live, we would love for you to step through it with us. One of the things that you can do right now is to pop open a new window in your browser, a new tab. Head over to the new tab in your browser and type in the URL that you see there, professormesser.com/QA. That is the link to our questions and answers, and we will be going through all of our Q&A today will be from that URL. So you only have to go to that URL and then nowhere else. You're good after doing that. So one of the things, if you go out there now to that link, there will be a question waiting for you. The rules that we have with these questions online, of course, if you've joined us before, you're probably aware of this. I will ask these questions and answers. The place where you will answer the information will be at professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers in the chat room. Please do not put any hints in the chat room. Our question, which is what we call our rewind question, because this is the only old question you're going to see today, is a question from last month where I asked you, a technician has configured port security on a switch. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this configuration? Would it be to block switched loops, prioritize specific traffic flows, tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value, prevent more than one device on a single interface, or allow specific MAC addresses? You think you know the answer? You can go to the link that you see here, professormesser.com/QA, and we will be coming back to this question in just a moment. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody for being here. We do one of these study groups every month, and of course, all of the content that we are going to be discussing today is coming directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. The version of the Network Plus exam that we are currently using here in April of 2026, had to think about that one, is the N10-009. This is an exam version that was released in June of 2024, and we estimate that the retirement for this exam will be somewhere around the fourth calendar quarter of 2027. That means as we sit here in April 2026, you have plenty of time to work on Network Plus, so you're in a good place. As we get closer to the end of 2027, you'll probably want to check in with CompTIA or here and make sure that you are studying for the right version of the exam. The exam itself is a 90-minute exam. You would get a maximum of 90 questions. You'll probably get fewer than 90 questions, but they could ask you a maximum of 90, which would be remarkably rare as it turns out. So, but just be prepared for that. The exam score that you are looking for on a scale from 100 to 900, already an unusual scale, the score you want is a 720 to pass. That 720 comes up, you're Network Plus certified. Single exam, you pass it with a 720 or more, and you're done with Network Plus. Once you are certified, that certification is good for 3 years. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions, which we've already seen one of those today. It also has performance-based questions, and we're going to do a performance-based question before we are done with this study group today. We'll talk more about what those are also. Also on our website, of course, our entire course is free and available for you to watch at any time. There's no registration required. Nothing is behind a paywall. We don't leave out any information. You simply go to our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube, and you can watch the entire thing. Of course, we have other tools that might help you, other study materials that could assist you with the study process. Course notes, we have downloadable videos, our exam hacks ebook, so much more. It's available on our website. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have this live stream available and all of the archives of this live stream on our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. There's a whole playlist for these. This will be added to that playlist automatically when I stop the live stream. I also create an audio-only version of this that I distribute in podcast format. So if you have a favorite podcast listening program, you like to listen in the car, you like to listen when you work out, you can add us to your podcast listening program at professormesser.com/podcast. And you'll see links there for adding us into your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus streams. You can keep up with everything that we are doing here. If you prefer listening to podcasts on a streaming service, maybe you go over to Spotify. You can, of course, look for Professor Messer on Spotify, and we're archiving all of our podcast versions of our study groups out there as well. So you're good either way. You can find us pretty much everywhere you go. And if we're not where you are, let me know, and I'll make sure we get ourselves over to that location. About a day after we're done, you'll notice that the YouTube video description for this live stream will have some annotation added to it with timestamps. That's not something that happens automatically. This incredibly accurate timestamp is added thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay. Lori, she's going through all of this and putting in all of those timestamps so that you can find exactly what you're looking for as quickly as possible. That's something that might help you. If you're someone who likes to have those timestamps there, make sure you hit a heart in the chat room. Let Lori know that's something that you like as well. It's something that I like, certainly on here. I think it helps everybody find the information that they are looking for. Thank you, Lori. Also, when we're not here on our live stream, we're usually over on Discord. You can find us there at professormesser.com/Discord, where thousands of people are registered on our Discord to learn about A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other certifications. And there's a lot of smart people there as well. It's really a fantastic community of smart people. We've got a number of people studying. There's people that already have their certifications that are working on getting another one, or even helping other people with their A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certifications. It's nice to have some practical knowledge in there. I'm one that comes from that school of hard knocks, working in the industry, working for network providers, protocol analysis, cybersecurity, next generation firewalls. But it's always nice to have other people in there that are doing other parts of technology. It's one of the great things about this community is that everybody has something that they can share there. We can learn from each other. And it's a great place to do it at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take the exam. And if you're in college, then you can probably get those very inexpensively over at the CompTIA website. But the rest of us have to pay full price if we go over to the CompTIA website. Well, not so for you if you happen to live in the US or Canada, because we have discounted vouchers on our site. It's the same vouchers you get over on the CompTIA website. You're just paying less money. I know, it seems like it's an obvious thing, isn't it? You can find out about this at professormesser.com/vouchers, and all of the CompTIA vouchers are covered on that page. Not only do you get your voucher for less money, I even give you something you can't get over on the CompTIA website or anywhere else for that matter. It's my Exam Hacks ebook. This is a list of tips and tricks and strategies that I put together through the years for taking these types of industry certification exams, things that could even help you during the exam itself. We don't sell this book. You can only get it if you purchase a voucher or you purchase one of our success bundles, something that is exclusive and added to your order automatically when you purchase a discounted voucher from professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about that question I asked earlier, much earlier, because this is a question from last month. And this is one we're going to see how well we remember this. The question is, a technician has configured port security on a switch. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this configuration? Would it be block switched loops, prioritize specific traffic flows, tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value, prevent more than one device on a single interface, or allow specific MAC addresses? Well, this would be an interesting one. Let's see how we did. It was a bit of a, as I recall, a bit of a rainbow when we saw it on last month's. Let's close the poll, and we did pretty well this time. I think we did a little better this time than we did last. We actually did a lot better than we did last time. But interestingly enough, a tie for first place. 40% say prevent more than one device on a single interface. 40% say allow specific MAC addresses. There is a little bit of nuance here, and we should talk about that. 12% said to prioritize specific traffic flows. We have 5% that said block switch loops, and only 2% said to tag outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value. The idea of port security, and the reason we call it security in the name, is that it's designed to stop intruders. It's designed to stop people trying to attack the network or to effectively plug into an available interface and suddenly gain access to your network. You can prevent unauthorized users by turning on port security. Now, you can do this based on a source MAC address, and every interface that is on your switch can be configured with a different port security configuration. Port security is designed to allow the first person into an interface to always have access to that. This is something very useful if you've been in a very large environment where there's a lot of people and anyone could walk up to any Ethernet jack, unplug someone's computer, and then plug in their own laptop, for example. That's something that port security is designed to stop. And in many cases, we are able to prevent just only the first. We can allow the first station in, but prevent all other devices from ever connecting to that particular interface, even if we don't know their MAC addresses. That's one great benefit of port security. So when we talk about port security and the importance of it, we really are talking about preventing people from gaining access to the network. Even if we don't know anything about any other MAC addresses, we don't even have to know specifics of any MAC addresses. We simply say the first person who connects to this interface is the legitimate user, and if anybody else tries to physically plug into that interface, port security will block them. That's, in that particular case, preventing more than one device on a single interface really is the most likely reason for this configuration. Thankfully, we don't have to know anything about specific MAC addresses on the network. Port security is designed to simply take the first one, and that makes it very easy. We don't have to manually program MAC addresses into our switches, thankfully. It's a lot easier than that. Can you imagine if we're swapping out interfaces, we're swapping out devices, and port security would have to be updated every time? We'd really be doing nothing else but configuring port security. Thankfully, it's much more automatic than that. 12% of you said to prioritize specific traffic flows. That would be a quality of service type scenario, not one associated with port security. 5% said block switched loops. That's spanning tree protocol, STP, not port security. And tagging outgoing traffic with a specific VLAN value, that sounds like 802.1q, that is trunking. So in this case, the answer that we were looking for was the one that 40% of you chose, which is to prevent more than one device on a single interface. It's a very good definition of port security. And it looks like we're able to get in. We're able to answer our questions. We know exactly where to go to be able to do this. So, of course, if you're not watching this live, you're watching this on a replay, you won't be able to interactively vote on these things, but you will be able to still participate. And you can always follow along with what we think the right answer happens to be. Well, that was a multiple choice question. It was a single question, there it is, with multiple options to choose from. And if you're looking at those multiple options to choose from, there are a number of them there that you could choose, obviously, but you had a 20% chance of getting it right, even if you guessed. If you had no idea what the answer was and you just threw a dart at the screen, don't do that, and hit one of those, you could choose that answer and you'd be 20% of this would be right. On the exam, you commonly get 4 answers, which means that your chance goes up to 25% on the actual exam in most cases. Well, CompTIA doesn't want to make things quite so easy for you. So they created a new kind of question that has no format whatsoever. It can effectively take any form they would like. That means there is an unlimited number of ways to ask a question in what they call a performance-based question format. You'll hear it or see it sometimes abbreviated as a PBQ, performance-based question. Performance-based questions could be fill in the blank. They could put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. There could be a matching question. It could be drag and drop. Think of all the different ways you could ask a question. That's a performance-based question. The important part to remember, however, is it doesn't matter how the question is being asked. The important part is, do you know the answer? And since all of the performance-based questions are based on information that is contained within the official CompTIA exam objectives, if you know the objectives, you'll be able to answer these questions without any kind of problem whatsoever. fact, most people come back after their exam and they say, I was expecting a difficult time with these performance-based questions. They were very straightforward. And they could say that because they knew the answer when they walked in the door, even if they didn't know the question. That's a big benefit. And we'll talk more about the performance-based questions. We'll talk more about the official exam objectives and the strategies for that in just a bit as we go through this study group. So I have for you today a performance-based question, a brand new one, just as I do with every study group. And we did one last month that was a command line question, but more of a question of working and trying to make things make sense on the network. This one's going to be more of a troubleshooting performance-based question because I want you to answer some questions for me, the questions that we have right here. One of the things that I often find as I'm going through these questions and trying to figure out the details of them is that the questions themselves are relatively straightforward. One of the things about Network Plus, however, is they don't position or focus on any particular operating system. That means that you could be performing these functions in a Windows environment, in a Linux environment, in a Mac OS environment, or almost anything else. So these are the questions that I have for you. Let's start at the top. What IP address is assigned to the local computer? And because there's no specific operating system mentioned, I want you to tell me the answer in both Windows and Linux, because both of those are in the exam objective. So you do have to know both of them. What, from the command line, answer that question. What IP address is assigned to the local computer? What would you type in to answer that question? Next on our list is, how many hops are there between your workstation and 1.1.1.1? It's a Cloudflare address for those interested. And I want you to tell me what command you would use to find that information of how many hops there are between your workstation and 1.1.1.1. Next, I want you to tell me what the public IP address is of www.professormesser.com. That would be interesting to see as well. And I've got a bit of a repeat here because I want you to see the difference. How many hops are there between your workstation and www.professormesser.com? Really, I'm having you compare and contrast, if you will. It's interesting to do these commands and see the output. It's more interesting if you can perform a command, see the output, and then compare it to another form of that output and see what the differences might be. So we're going to look at that as well. And then lastly, what MAC address is associated with the default gateway? All of these are pretty interesting to go through. We're going to step through them and see if we can decipher them in just a bit. But of course, I want you to tell me what you think the answer might be. You can submit your answers at professormesser.com/QA. There it is, the link right there at the bottom of your screen. At professormesser.com/QA. That's it. So see what you think the answer might be for these. Obviously, performance-based questions can take any form, but this is probably one of the more common forms. We plop you down at the command line. You have to type something in. What do you type in? What is that going to be? So see if you know what that is. You can always submit your answers. I'm looking for some details of what this might be. And some of these answers, by the way, might have more than one command that you could use. I'm really looking for the best command, and you'll see why in just a moment, especially when we're talking about things like, I'm not even going to go into it. Well, I don't want to give you any hints. I almost said something. Did you see that? I almost gave something away. We're not going to give anything away. We're instead going to figure this out the way that it is. I'm hopefully going to be able to do this on my screen as well. I've got a VM that I've got running here, and maybe we'll run some of these commands in my virtual machine as long as my caps lock is not on, so I can type in the password, and we can go through the process of trying out some of these ourselves just to see what we get. When I ran it on my network, I found some interesting things that I think you might find interesting. So we're going to step through a number of these and see if we can figure out what we think these answers are. Okay, well, this has been these 5 things, really 4 things, because one of them we are doing twice. These 5 things can be really, really useful to know. And if you look at the official exam objectives, all of these commands are obviously listed in there. We need to know how to use these commands. And certainly going beyond that, we need to know when we would use these commands. And that's really what this question is trying to ask is, when would you use that command? In what scenario? And we're sort of reversing that and giving you the scenario and then asking you which command to use. Very common on the exam for them to do that. They don't usually ask specific definitional questions. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. They tend to instead take a technology and ask you, how is that technology used? So we're going to do that right now. From what IP address is assigned to the local computer? That's something we would like to know. That's something probably you want to know when you first sit down at a computer. You want to start working on this. You want to type this in, start working and figuring it out, but you have to know the basics of where you're starting, and knowing the IP address of the local computer is good. In Windows, it's an ipconfig command. You're probably familiar with that one. I'm running Linux on my workstation here. So in Linux, we can do an ifconfig, and it shows us the IP configurations for everything else that's running on our network. This particular system I'm running has an IP address of 10.211.55.21. It has a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. My broadcast address is 10.211.55.255. So we got a few things we can pull from there, but there's a very quick way to know what IP address am I. In fact, we know even from here what our subnet mask is. If you're running on Windows, it even tells you what your default gateway is set to and what your DNS configurations might be. There's other things we can, of course, go from there. If you're running in Linux, there are different ways to be able to work through that. So hopefully this gives you some idea of things that you can do to make the command line process work for you. And knowing what the IP address is an important step of working through all of these. Next on our list, we have a different command that says, all right, well, if we know our local IP address, how many hops are there between your workstation and 1.1.1.1? 1.1.1.1 is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, an IP address over at Cloudflare. So let's do that. Let's figure out how many hops there are between me and that device. And I'm going to show you on my local network, and I'm not really worried about that right now because, well, you'll see in a moment. The command we're looking for is a traceroute command, and we're going to traceroute to 1.1.1.1. Traceroute shows us how many hops there are between different places. So if you're running a device and you're trying to figure out how many different routers are there between here and that destination, and what is the IP address of those routers? And if we aren't able to reach a destination, what's the last router we were able to talk to before the network suddenly stopped talking to us? It can be an interesting thing to figure out. So traceroute is what we're going to use, and the command I'm going to use is traceroute 1.1.1.1. And it's going to go through the process of tracing this out and figuring out the detail. Oh, and I'm not on my local network to be able to show you this. I wanted to even show you the breakdown of this on my local network and have it here. And I'm going to have to go to my slides that I have here to be able to find the details of this because I don't have my internet connectivity set up for this VM. So if we want to use traceroute, that's what we want to use. It will create a step-by-step, router by router, or as we say in the industry, hop by hop breakdown of everything that we're doing on our network. Traceroute is a useful tool to be able to make that happen. Let's bring up a separate screen and see if I can provide you with anything. I'm going to do it on Mac OS. Why not? It's pretty much the same. If you're in Windows, obviously it's traceRT to be able to make that happen. I'm going to do a traceroute of 1.1.1.1, and it's going to go through a process of tracing out every hop along the way. Notice we start with 10.1.10.1. That's my local router. And then it goes to 100.121.18.1. Then it goes to 10.1.1.2. It's an interesting one. And then there's a bunch of other things. Here's one in, looks like Orlando. That's a router in Orlando. It goes from Orlando to Miami, it looks like. I'm looking at the abbreviations here. ORL is Orlando. MIA being Miami. So we're going down probably to the Miami NAP or somewhere down there. We have other options here going to gtt.net, finally to 108.162.211.228, and then finally to 1.1.1.1, which the folks at Cloudflare are a little cheeky. They've named the host one.one.one.one.one. That's pretty good. That's well done, fellas. Nice job on that one. This is also, by the way, a great way to go through and see how things are running on the network. We're going to leave that right there, as a matter of fact. There are a couple of interesting parts about my network, however, that you may have noticed. One is that Hop4 not giving me any response. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's my local ISP that is obviously limiting or filtering, I think, from either one or more different routers. Sometimes a router will respond back to me, sometimes it won't, but this is primarily using ICMP to send these messages to me, and ICMP is at a lower priority than actual network traffic. So it could be a combination of they're filtering it out, or it could be that the router just isn't bothering to send it because it has other things to do right now. Another part that's interesting in this is, notice I go from a 10.1.10.1 network, because my network locally is 10.1.10.1. Then it goes to 100.121.18.1. We don't learn about this one in Network Plus. It's outside the scope of the exam, but just from an interesting perspective, that is a carrier grade NAT address. That is a private address. It's defined as a CGNAT, carrier grade network address translation. So my local ISP is natting internally and then putting me on a different 10.1.1.2 network, which is not mine, interestingly enough, and then hitting the final router, and then we're outside of our ISP at that point. So an interesting thing, you can really find a lot of interesting details inside one single output, and studying those can sometimes give you a little bit of interesting perspective on where things happen to be. Next on our list, our question, now that we understand kind of the route that this is taking, I wanted to know, what's the public IP address of www.professormesser.com? Well, some of the answers I got from that one were interesting. I mentioned that there are some places where you might see more than one answer could apply, but really only one of those is the best answer. And let me give an example of that. So I wanted to know what the public IP address is of professormesser.com, www.professormesser.com. So from our command prompt, I'm going to, I did get an answer in that said I would use ping www.professormesser.com, and it would ping it. And in the ping, it tells me an IP address, 104.20.22.204. Well, that certainly is one of the public IP addresses associated with professormesser.com, but it's not all of them. Oh, so ping is, it's good to a point, but what if there are more than one? What if there's more than one address that is associated with www.professormesser.com? Well, how would you even see that? How would you even know it to know that it was there? So what we're going to do is run a command that allows us to get more information directly from the CompTIA, from the DNS server itself. And that command, if you were going to run it on your network, it depends on the operating system you're running, but it will either be NSLOOKUP to perform a name server lookup. That's a utility that's available in Windows, certainly. It's also commonly available in Linux, but you may find that newer Linux distributions don't have that available. Instead, you would use the dig command, dig, to do that. There doesn't tend to be a native dig command in Windows. You can find some third parties that already have a compiled version. They used to have one over on the ISC website. I notice now that that has been deprecated. They no longer include a dig binary in the distribution that's there. Or you might want to look at a Windows version. I know there's a Windows dig that's available out there. You might want to try different utilities there. So let's do a dig. Let's dig www.professormesser.com. And the answer that we get is interesting. It tells us that, oh, you're performing a dig command to www.professormesser.com. I'm going to give you that information. I found the record that I want to ask about, which is the internet address, the INA for that record. And we got an answer from a DNS server that said, oh, I have two records in my DNS configuration. One of the IP addresses is 172.66.174.118. 172.66. That's not the command we got up here. The command we got up here was 104.20.22.204. In fact, if you look, I got a second IP address that came through, and that one is 104.20.22.204. So although ping gave us part of the answer, it didn't give us the complete answer. And if you want a complete view of how this particular fully qualified domain name is configured in your DNS server, which is where all of your users are getting the IP addresses from, you're best using dig or NSLOOKUP to be able to find that information out. So make sure you keep that in mind, that sometimes ping can be useful. Other times it may not be giving you the whole picture. Something to think about and consider if you're planning to work through that. And I gave you that other question in here, which is kind of a duplicate, which is how many hops are there between your workstation and www.professormesser.com? Let's run that one and we'll compare it to what we had before, shall we? Let's bring this over and let's run another traceroute command, traceroute, because I am in Mac OS here, and I'm going to traceroute to www.professormesser.com. And we're going to have it go through that trace route as well. Starts out the same, goes to my router. There's the carrier grade NAT address that I'm using. Oh, look, we did get a response on that fourth hop this time. I told you sometimes we get, but the other two we didn't. Completely normal. This is the way that trace routes work. But as soon as we get over to GTTNet, notice there were 3 different routers in front of what must be Cloudflare. In our previous trace route, we go up, scroll up. You'll notice that we got 1 in our particular trace there. Not too unusual, but notice that Professor Messer and the Cloudflare address of 1.1.1.1 effectively follow the same route. What is that about? Well, if we look here at the bottom, there's our final address, 104.20.22.204. That was the IP address associated with professormesser.com. Well, that's because the Professor Messer website uses Cloudflare as a reverse proxy for a number of different reasons, security being one of them, being able to control access to the server, provide IPS, IDS functionality, WAF capabilities, and other things that Cloudflare can do for you. So whenever you look at a Cloudflare address and you look at a professormesser.com address, you'll notice that those two tend to be pointing to the same place. One of the benefits of using a proxy. So where is my server? Ooh, you'll never know. The real IP address of my server is a mystery. Another great advantage of having a reverse proxy. It's not that you couldn't find it if you didn't look hard enough. I, more than anybody, can recognize that that's not going to be something to hide you from the network, from the internet bad guys, but it is something that does help make the process much more streamlined and easier to control from my side, because you will always be talking to Cloudflare if you're ever going to be communicating to www.professormesser.com. So interesting, we ran 2 different trace routes. In this case, both the trace routes were almost identical, which may not have been what you were originally thinking was going to happen. So another one of those that you might want to consider. And the last question on our list is, what MAC address is associated with the default gateway? MAC addresses are interesting because we don't tend to see them at the command prompt unless it's on our local machine, but we do store MAC addresses on our computer in different places. And one of the ways that we can do that, we know our default gateway here, for example, is 10.1.10.1 because that was our first router hop from our local network. So if we were able to somehow do an ARP-A, which would show our ARP table that is local, we can look at all of the matches that we have between IP addresses we've talked to and what the MAC address is associated with that IP address. And you can see 10.1.10.1, its MAC address is 9 Charlie 05 Delta 6 Charlie Bravo Bravo 4 Charlie 3. That is the MAC address of my default gateway. It is stored in my ARP cache so that we don't have to constantly send an ARP request and get an ARP response every time we want to talk to our default gateway. That is not something you really want, is every time you talk to be sending these ARPs. Instead, we'll send the ARP one time, and then we'll cache it for 5 minutes or so. Depends on the operating system, depends on your configuration, but that's usually what you will find. As a number of minutes goes by, it drops out of the cache, so every 5 minutes, we might ask for a new ARP. This is great, by the way, if your default gateway suddenly changes to something else. you know that everybody will be communicating out the right gateway in at least 5 minutes because their ARP cache will time out and they'll now be up and running on the network. ARP caches can be a challenge. If you've ever been adding, changing, or moving servers on the network and suddenly you can't talk to the server, it may be because your ARP cache still thinks it's at the original location. So you have to clear the ARP cache, disable the interface. There's a number of different ways to do it so that your ARP cache clears out, or you can just wait 5 minutes. And then when you come back, it'll finally perform a new ARP to that particular device. And now we're looking at the new IP address. Just another one of those things to think about, all of the internals that happen under the surface. So those were the answers that we were hoping for. IP address assigned to the local computer. In Windows, it's an IP config. In Linux, it's ifconfig. Also in Linux, another command we didn't talk about is the IP command. On newer Linux distributions, they don't use ifconfig. It's not even there. You would need to use the IP space address option. If you're not sure, do an IP/?. It'll show you all the different options that are available to you. The number of hops between our workstation and some other IP address, we would use traceroute or traceRT if you're in the Windows world. What is the public IP address of www.professormesser.com? You can use NSLOOKUP. You can use dig. Both of those would be preferable to doing a traceroute or a ping or something that's only going to provide you with one single IP address. And then the MAC address associated with the default gateway, the best way to find that is not walking over to the default gateway and looking to see if the MAC address is on it. You instead can simply use the ARP command with the -A option to view what happens to be in the ARP cache right now. Well, those were the answers, hopefully, that you got as well. I saw a number of people and the answers coming in looked very similar to that. So hopefully you've got an idea of where you can go with this. That's our performance-based question of the month. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question, which is very commonly what you will see on your exam. You'll get a handful of performance-based questions at the beginning of your exam, and then you will get a separate question or a number of different questions after that that are multiple choice questions. So our next multiple choice question is the one that you see on the screen, which asks, a technician is connecting two switches where both switches are configured with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Which of the following would be the best way to connect these two switches using one physical network cable? Would it be virtual private network, 802.1q trunk, access port, loopback connection, or static route? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. This is a relatively common configuration on most networks. VLANs that are being used on multiple switches. I don't want to give too much away, but this is something that you will certainly run into in the world of networking and an important part of networking. It's really a fundamental type knowledge of networking. Make sure you're familiar, not just what the actual answer is, make sure you also know what all of the other answers are. Everything that's on this list comes directly from the exam objectives. So not only do you need to know the right answer here, you also need to be familiar with the wrong answers. So if you aren't familiar with any of the wrong answers or what you think the wrong answer might be, make a note and put that into your study list so that you can study on those topics later on. Might be something to consider. Let's see how we did. A lot of people got their answers locked in really quick. I always look at that number in the upper right and see how we're doing. A lot of answers came in very quick. So let's see how we did. The question again asks, a technician is connecting two switches where both switches are configured with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Which of the following would be the best way to connect these two switches using one physical network cable? Would it be virtual private network, 802.1q trunk, access port, loopback connection, or static route? Let's close our poll and see how we did. And we did very well, or at least we think we did very well. At least 76% of us think that we did very well with an 802.1q trunk. Everything else is now single digits. 9% of you said access port. We have 7% that said a loopback connection. We have 4% that said a static route would work. And then 3% said you would use a virtual private network or VPN. As I mentioned before, this is a common challenge. You have two separate physical switches, and here's one switch on the top and one switch on the bottom. In this particular example, we have a VLAN 100 and a VLAN 200 on the top switch, and we also have a VLAN 100 and a VLAN 200 on the bottom switch. Both of those VLANs are for the same groups. So they're the same VLAN, they just happen currently to be separated on two different switches. But we would like all of the devices connected to VLAN 100, it's this laptop that's over here, we'd like that laptop to also communicate to the other VLAN 100 devices on the other switch. Well, we could just simply put a couple of cables. It's only two VLANs. We could put a cable for VLAN 100 and send it across the other switch. And then we could put another cable for VLAN 200 and send it across to the other switch. See, problem solved. As you could probably see here, this does not scale very well. What if there were 100 VLANs on one switch and 100 VLANs on the other switch? We don't have enough interfaces to put 100 cables between both of those. That's also not a great way to do it. It's not very effective. We're using more interfaces than we need to. We're running more cables than we need to. There's a much better way to go about doing this. What if we could have one single cable, but on that single cable, put all of the VLANs running across that connection? We refer to that as a trunk connection. So you can see by putting that single cable, we'll put a tag onto the frame, send that frame across the network, and on the other side, your other switch will look at the tag and say, oh, that's for VLAN 200. Let me get rid of the tag, and we'll send that traffic over to VLAN 200. Oh, there's one that came through. Oh, this tag says VLAN 100. Let's get rid of the tag, and we'll send that frame over to the VLAN 100. Makes it very efficient because we're only putting one cable on the line, but we're able to send multiple VLANs over that single cable. Obviously, this could be a challenge if you have a lot of bandwidth requirements. That means you might want to have a higher speed trunk. Very commonly, these would be a higher speed. So you might have gigabit connections here on the network, and the trunk might be 10 gig, for example. Or maybe we have multiple connections that we are using a link aggregation, and we're even adding additional 10 gig links. So we could have up to maybe 40 gig going over the trunk, and it's being able to support multiple VLANs at the same time. The IEEE standard for doing this, we call it trunking, just a colloquial term that we can use to describe what it's doing. If you wanted to look at the actual standard, that actual standard is 802.1Q, capital Q. 802.1Q is trunking, and that's why on our list and the things that we need to know, I even spelled it out so you could see, oh, that's an 802.1Q trunk. 76% of you chose that, and 76% of you got that one absolutely correct. 9% of you said an access port is what we need. An access port is really a Cisco term, but other switches have used the same term. If you are plugging in a workstation, a laptop, or just a normal computer into a switch, that interface is an access interface. You are accessing the network. That's a good way to think about it. That's a standard switch port. That's the normal switch port that you commonly plug into. We also call them access ports. So on your switch, most of the interfaces will either be an access port or something else. An access port and a trunk port, for example. An access port and a lag interface. So the access port is just the normal user connection to your switch. Access ports do not allow you to connect multiple VLANs using a single cable. That won't work. It's effectively connecting one VLAN, and it's the one that you happen to be on, which really is not doing any type of VLAN type work there. We're just connecting switches together. So access port would not work in this scenario. Loopback connections are incredibly useful for troubleshooting devices, especially if you're concerned that the interfaces themselves might have a problem, or maybe the cables that we're using have a problem. We can plug in a fiber or copper connection into the back of an interface that takes all of the traffic going out of that interface and loops it back into the interface. Why would you want to do that? Well, because you can say, send out these numbers of packets out the interface, and then you can see what packets came in. Do the type of packets and the information we sent out match the information that's coming in? Or does it not match the information coming in? It all should match. All we're doing is looping it back. So in that particular case, it's very useful for troubleshooting, but it doesn't help you connect multiple switches and the VLANs associated with those multiple switches. 4% of you said static route. This is great for layer 3 communication, IP addresses that need to communicate back and forth. We did a trace route. There were probably some of those routes that were configured on that router as a static route, but that is nothing to do with VLANs. VLANs are all operating at layer 2, the data link layer of the network, not layer 3, which would be where static routes would take place. Those are two different functions, and static routes have nothing to do with connecting different VLANs across different switches. And then finally, we have 3% of you that said a VPN, a virtual private network. This is an encrypted tunnel in most cases that is able to send information securely from one location to another, especially over public networks like the internet. VPNs are great for securely connecting you from a remote location, but they have nothing to do with connecting multiple VLANs across multiple switches. So VPNs, virtual private network, would not be the right answer. The right one was the one that the vast majority of you chose. 76% of you said 802.1q trunk, and you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Let's do another question. I've been talking a lot on this one, so we're going to try to get through a few more questions before we're done today. Our next question is this one that asks, a city's traffic control system relies on a complex network of sensors and lights which must remain operational at all times. Which of the following best describes this infrastructure? Is it a VLAN, IoT, BYOD, OT, or PCI DSS? If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See what you think the answer is for this one. This is one we live with every day. If you are anywhere that has a traffic control system, you have stoplights, you have or where I grew up, a flashing yellow light. There were no stoplights. I think in this case, I think the county I grew up in, even still today, does not have a red, yellow, green traffic light. I think that's still true in the very rural area I grew up in. So this is one where you have to think about even the flashing yellow lights need to always be operational because they ultimately will turn red and allow the fire truck to get out. That's why we have that flashing yellow light in the middle of town. That's, at least in our town, that's what it was. That's where we are. So the infrastructure is important, and understanding these infrastructures is important for understanding what type of network connectivity we're going to use and what type of security we're going to use on these networks. So we have to start somewhere. Let's see how we did with this one. The question again asks, a city's traffic control system relies on a complex network of sensors and lights which must remain operational at all times. Which of the following best describes this infrastructure? Is it VLAN, IoT, BYOD, OT, or PCI DSS? What did you choose? I'm glad you asked. Let's find out. We'll close our poll. A bit of a rainbow, but we did get a majority. 52% of you say the answer is IoT, the Internet of Things. 34% of you said it's OT, operational technology. We have single digits. 8% said PCI DSS, the payment card industry security. VLAN got 4% of the vote. We talked about VLANs in our last question. And then 2% of you said BYOD. BYOD was bring your own device. That is the answer that you chose. In this case, the answer that we were looking for was the one that 34% of you chose, which is OT. OT. What is OT? OT is operational technology. So if you're working in an environment with a lot of industrial equipment, you're working for an electric company, you are creating the electricity, that's a pretty important infrastructure. So it's important to understand how you would network all of those devices together. Same thing applies for traffic control. Here in the state of Florida, traffic control, and really everywhere, traffic control is incredibly important. But of course, you have times where the traffic lights won't work. Maybe just a traffic light will stop. Here in Florida, of course, we have a lot of storms and hurricanes. There are times when entire sections of traffic lights are out. Of course, if you ever approach an intersection and the traffic light is out, at least in the state of Florida, it's a four-way stop at that point. Keep that in mind. Be very safe if you happen to approach an intersection that is missing a traffic light. Operational technology is the important term that we need to know here, because you have to also think about how you're going to network these together and how you're going to secure these. This has become important really most recently with a lot of the conflicts that are going on in the world and a lot of countries that are attacking other countries, not just attacking physically, but attacking through cybersecurity type modes. People are trying to hack into different countries. Now we're at the big part of these different countries trying to get in and create havoc and create chaos, and being able to imagine taking down the electrical systems, taking down all of the traffic lights in a busy metropolitan area. Could you imagine the chaos that would occur with something like that? That would be perfect for creating a problem. And this is something we want to protect ourselves against. So we have to understand the environment before we can understand how to secure that environment. And operational technology is an important consideration. So important that CompTIA is even releasing a new certification coming up for operational technology. It's a cert specifically designed for this. Obviously, that's a bit niche, but there are a group of people. I've worked with a number of different municipalities and electric power companies, and I understand how important it is and the unique requirements they have for making sure that the network stays up and running, that they're able to manage and maintain the network, but at the same time, keep that network safe and out of the hands of anyone who wants to cause any problems. Operational technology is what we were looking for. OT got 34% of the vote, not a majority. The one that got the majority was IoT, Internet of Things. And although Internet of Things is a popular category, it really specifies smaller devices. Your watch, your smartwatch, having a router in your home is an IoT device. Maybe you've got a camera on your doorbell. Maybe the garage door that you have is one where you can use an app to go up and down. That's Internet of Things. Obviously has a very different approach to security and a different approach to management than something like power generation or traffic lights. So although IoT is a popular answer, in this case, this was the most popular answer, but not the correct answer for what we were looking for. 8% of you said payment card industries security. PCI DSS is a series of requirements from the credit card companies for keeping credit card information safe if you're storing that data. At ProfessorMesser.com, we don't store your credit card information. We aren't subject to PCI DSS, but we do have a credit card processor that is required to comply with the payment card industry requirements. And because of that, they have a lot of different security controls they have to put into place. But those security controls have nothing to do with the city's traffic control system, so PCI DSS would not be the answer we wanted. A virtual local area network, we just talked about VLANs and how we're able to group very similar devices together on the same virtual networks. But in this case, the 4% of you that answered this did not get the right answer. And lastly, we have BYOD, bring your own device, which is a common standard that many organizations will use so that you can use your own personal smartphone and then be able to use that with corporate data. BYOD. That means you can have one device and won't have to carry around multiple phones, one that's your work phone and one that is your home phone. Have everything on one device. We'll just partition it out logically within that device, very commonly using our mobile device manager or our MDM. In this case, though, if we're talking about a traffic control system, we're talking about electrical systems, we're talking about operational technology, and that was the answer that we were looking for here. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is you follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the link that says Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put April 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, operational technology, spelled out, and IoT, not spelled out. I guess you could spell out or not spell out both of those. I think I can probably figure out both of those and work on all of those. So again, you can submit those by going to ProfessorMesser.com. Click the Contact Us link in the top or the bottom of the website. Once you click Contact Us, it'll bring up a form. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put April 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Operational Technology, IoT. That way I know that you must have watched this to be able to work through it. So make sure you are familiar with all of those that might be able to help you if you were able to run into needing an extra CEU, continuing education unit credit for renewing your certification. One of the things that might also help you is being able to take all of this information from all of our training videos and put it into one single place. This would be my course notes. My course notes are available and they cover all of the videos in our course for Network Plus. That is 87 videos, over 12 hours of content that are in our course. That's a lot of content to be working through. And if you're somebody who, like me, who watches a video, but it takes a long time to get all the way through them, by the time you're done, you might have forgotten what the first videos were about. Well, if you've got my course notes, you can open up the course notes package. You can read through it. This is a PDF. And then you can read through what was covered in the OSI model video, what was covered in the networking functions video, what about designing the cloud and having a network security list, what about cloud models, what about IP communication, LDAP database structures, port numbers, and more. They are in our course notes. We not only have them in a digital form, they're also available in a physical printed form as well. I'll probably show you this a little better. If I put my face on the screen, I could probably make that happen. Or, maybe not. Maybe I'm just creating problems for myself. There we go. So here we go. This is the printed version of the course notes, obviously full color. It's a perfect bound, as they say, which is the softback binding for a book. And the things that you just saw me flipping through there are the same things that are in this book. You could see an example of those that's right there. That is my course notes. They are available for you on our website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN. Also a great way to support the things that we are doing here with the technologies, the training courses, the live streams, and everything else that we do. So thank you so much for your continued support with that. Let's do some more questions, shall we? Next on our list, I think we could fit a couple more in, right? That would be good. Let's get another question going. This question is one that asks, an administrator is configuring a new switch and wants to ensure it is elected as the root bridge. Which of the following would determine which switch becomes the root? Would it be the highest MAC address value, the lowest number of hops, the highest bandwidth capability or highest bandwidth capacity, the most redundant links, or the lowest bridge ID? It's got to be one of these, right? This is one where we do have to know something about this configuration. An administrator is configuring a new switch and wants to ensure it is elected as the root bridge. Which of the following would determine which switch becomes the root? Is it the highest MAC address value, the lowest number of hops, the highest bandwidth capacity, the most redundant links, or the lowest bridge ID? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. Lot listed here. All of these things would be good to know about, wouldn't they? And I intentionally left out some very specific words that could help you on this. So if you're having to piece things together to figure out the answer of this, that's by design. And in fact, that's a very common strategy that CompTIA uses on their exam. They don't always spoon feed you with every single bit of information. You often have to take multiple jumps through answering in your mind how you would get between point A, point B, point C, and finally to get to point D. That's something that CompTIA really, really works hard on their exams to make this more than just a definition knowledge flashcard type of exam. They really want to see if you know your stuff. So this would be one of those kinds of questions that's giving you just enough that you should be able to put together and connect all of those dots together for all of this. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, An administrator is configuring a new switch and wants to ensure it is elected as the root bridge. Which of the following would determine which switch becomes the root? Would it be the highest MAC address value, the lowest number of hops, the highest bandwidth capacity, the most redundant links, or the lowest bridge ID? Let's close our poll. We can see that 53% of you, just barely got a majority, say the answer is a lowest bridge ID. We do have 21% of you that said a lowest number of hops is what we are looking for. Then we have kind of a tie for third place. 12% said most redundant links. 11% said highest bandwidth capacity. And down at 3%, highest MAC address value was the answer that we were looking for. Well, in this case, of course, we are looking to understand more about how the internal processes of spanning tree protocol work properly. Whenever you talk about switches and root bridges, spanning tree is what we're referring to here. So spanning tree is one that we really do need to understand what spanning tree is doing for us. At a very high level, spanning tree is a way to prevent loops on a switch network, but there may be times when we want to add a very specific type of configuration into spanning tree, and you may want to specify that one of your switches, or bridges as we call them, that bridge is the root bridge of the spanning tree network. So whenever you start up the network, there's a process where all of the bridges or switches connect to each other and talk to each other and let everybody know, oh, I'm over here. Oh, hey, I'm over here. Oh, look, there's a third bridge over there. A lot of switches on this network. Let's make sure we don't create a loop, everybody. And usually there is one bridge that is determined to be the root bridge. This is sort of the starting point of the network in many cases, but it's one that gives us a way to get the best connections back to that root. So in fact, in many cases, you might want to specify which of these switches is the root so that it's not one that changes over time or is not the one that you were expecting. Well, the way that we determine a bridge ID is we set a number between 0 and 61,440. I hope you don't have that many switches on your network. The lowest ID, that's your root. So it's very common that if you have a bridge set to 1 and all other bridges set to 128, well, the one set to 1 has the lowest number, the lowest ID, so therefore it will be elected the root bridge. That's a pretty important one. Now, of course, you could either intentionally or accidentally set up multiple switches with the same bridge ID. There's no reason you can't. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. And your network will run fine, even if you use the same bridge ID across all of your switches. And if you just installed your switches with the default configuration, they might even have the same bridge ID across all of them. Well, if there's a tie, the lowest MAC address number wins. So you calculate the MAC address, you look at the MAC address on that interface, and the one that is the lowest value is the one that then becomes the root bridge. You are not going to have multiple interfaces on your network with the same MAC address. So that way we can really make sure that it's going to be a unique device that is chosen as the root bridge. So that's the important part of this, especially if you're configuring spanning tree, that you understand where is the root going to be on this network and how are we going to configure it. Well, then we go back to what we believe that answer is, and 53% of you got that one right. The lowest bridge ID is the answer that we were looking for. 3% of you said the highest MAC address value, but as I mentioned here, what we were looking for, if there's a tie, it's the lowest MAC address value that wins. So there's a very good example of how you have to know the difference here, especially on the exam when we're dealing with those. 21% though said the lowest number of hops. That can be certainly useful if we're talking about a routed network. Hops is a term that refers to packets that are going through a router. In this question, we were trying to configure a switch layer 2. So in this particular case, routers aren't involved. Hops aren't involved. It's only going to be a switched configuration dealing with MAC addresses. So the number of hops on your network is irrelevant to the process of spanning tree protocol, at least from a root bridge, configuring a root bridge perspective. 12% of you said most redundant links. Well, that's another very good example of how there are some routing protocols that will consider the number of different ways you can communicate across the network and set priorities based on that redundancy. But in this case, again, we're talking about switching. Switching doesn't have a way to do that. In fact, if you have redundant links on a switch network, you have a loop. That is not good. So that's why we have spanning tree to begin with. Sometimes we have redundant links, but spanning tree allows us to block one of those so that if you lose one connection, we can then switch over to the other one. So there is some value to having redundant, but the most redundant links is not part of the equation when you are trying to elect a root bridge. We're not looking at number of redundant links. We're looking at bridge ID. And if there's a tie, we're looking for a lowest MAC address. And then lastly, the highest bandwidth capacity. Spanning tree doesn't know anything about bandwidth, at least not generally speaking. Bandwidth capacity is not part of the election process for a root bridge. We're not considering how much bandwidth. We don't know how much bandwidth. Spanning tree doesn't concern itself with bandwidth. Spanning tree is only worried about connectivity. And in this particular case, it's always going to be the lowest bridge ID. And in the case of a tie, the lowest MAC address value. 53% of you got that one absolutely correct. I know we're at the top of the hour. We're sort of in an overtime scenario, but since I've been talking so much, I think we should do another question, right? Let's do another. Of course, in our after show coming up next, I'm going to answer your questions. You can submit those questions to me at any time using this link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. So if you have a question about IT, a question about the industry, a question about really anything you'd like to ask, you can do that by going to that same link, professormesser.com/QA, and answering that link. Let's do another question. This next on our list is a question that asks, a network technician is installing several new switches on the third floor of an office building to provide Ethernet ports for new employees. At which layer of the three-tier architecture are these switches being deployed? Would this be the client layer, the access layer, the distribution layer, the core layer, or the transit layer? This is one where we're all talking layers. This is a layered question for sure. We have to really understand what we're dealing with here. The question again asks, a network technician is installing several new switches on the third floor of an office building to provide Ethernet ports for new employees. At which layer of the three-tier architecture are these switches being deployed? Is it client layer, access layer, distribution layer, core layer, or transit layer? If you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See if you know what this one is. There are a number of different architectures listed in the Network Plus exam objectives. Make sure you understand all of them. You understand broadly when you would use these architectures, how you would use these architectures, why it's important to have these architectures. They're all there. You can figure out the details. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See how we do. A lot of people getting them in quick on this one too. I wonder if this is one where we all know it or we all think we know it, which is pretty much how I work every exam I take. Do I think I know this one? Well, we're going with it. We're gonna see how we do. Sometimes I go with that first option in my mind. Yep, that's the one. And then I always worry about changing it after the fact because I feel like that first option pulled from something maybe in the back of my mind that I wasn't really thinking about. And the more I think about the answer, I worry that it's not the right answer. It's really hard for me to change an answer after I make it. I really have to be sure of it. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's not so great. Let's see how we did with this one. I think we did great on this one. I did not look at the answers, so we're going to figure this one out together. The question again asks, a network technician is installing several new switches on the third floor of an office building to provide Ethernet ports for new employees. At which layer of the three-tier architecture are these switches being deployed? Is it client layer, access layer, distribution layer, core layer, or transit layer? Let's just jump to it. We close our poll, and the answer, 52% of you say that's the access layer. 31% said that's the distribution layer. And then we have single digits, practically a three-way tie for last place. 6% for core layer, 6% for transit layer, 5% for client layer. A layer. It's Batman's layer is where it is. But what is the right layer? 52% of you chose access layer, and access layer is indeed the answer that we were looking for. To better understand this, let's have a look at the three-tiered architecture. This is obviously the network configuration split into thirds, and this is the arc of networking, if you will. We have pairs of everything that are being put onto the network. We start at the very top is the core of the network. This is probably in your MDF. It's in your data center. There's probably very big core routers. These routers are commonly connected to the internet. So there's probably an internet cloud up here, and the core routers are connected to your internet layer. These core routers are responsible, and they're usually connected to each other, and they're usually responsible for taking data from one part of the network and transferring it over to another part of the network. Because there are multiples of these, there's redundancy built in. So if you lose one of these core switches or core routers, you'll be able to use the other one while you're trying to get that first one repaired. In the middle of this link is the distribution layer. This is usually a set of switches after the core routers that are handling really switching in the core or just outside the core. Usually this would be where our services might be held. You might have services in the core for databases, and we're using the distribution layer to talk up to the core and into those, or we might have services in the distribution layer itself. But very often the distribution layer is more of a transportation mechanism that connects our core to our access. And indeed, access layer is the layer at the bottom. This is where your end users are accessing the network. That's why we call it the access layer. These are usually workgroup switches that are on the same floor as the users. This is one where usually, if you're thinking about a very large network, let's say that you're in a college campus. College campus tends to have many different buildings. Each one of those buildings usually is a different set of people. So there might be an oceanography building, a economics building, a business building, an English building. And all of those might have different access switches in every floor of that building. And on that floor of the building, you have these users that are all connected to that access switch. And inside of that building, let's say we go to the economics building, there might be a distribution switch in the basement of the economics building. And that switch is connected to all of the other distribution switches at all of the other buildings, so that you're able to communicate from the economics building to a device that might be in the business building or in the English building. So the distribution layer you can think of as the building level of all of this. Somewhere on campus is a data center. It's only one of these usually. Data centers are relatively expensive to set up and keep running, so there's usually one of them. All of these distribution layers across all of the different buildings are then all going to tie back up into the core layer where the core of the network happens to be. So there's an example, a practical example really, of how you would implement the access layer, the distribution layer, and the core layer all from one single place. And indeed, the access layer is what we were looking for. That's where your users are plugging in, and that's where 52% of you said the answer was. That 52% of you got that one absolutely correct. As we already saw, the distribution layer is one layer up from the users. The users do not directly connect to the distribution layer. Usually it's the distribution layer connecting to access on one side and core on the other. As I mentioned, this is more of a transport layer that's getting information and moving it from one part of the network to the other. Very rarely, if ever, would users ever connect to anything in the distribution layer. And then we have, lastly, our core layer. 6% of you chose core layer. As you can tell from that view, the core layer is not where your users connect. It's about as far away from your users as you can get. So that is not going to be the answer that we were looking for. These other two that were listed on here, the client layer and the transit layer, not actual layers. Just made those up. Sorry about that. I ran out of layers. There's only 3 layers in a 3-layer architecture. I had to come up with something. And those made sense. The clients, they connect to a client layer. Of course they would, except we don't call it that. It's the access layer. And transit layer really more describes the distribution layer than anything, but we don't call it the transit layer. We call it the distribution layer. In this case, access, I've said layer so many times, I feel like it's not a word anymore. Access layer is what we were looking for. 52% of you Got that one right. That's the answer that we were looking for. That's what we were hoping to find. You guys did a great job with that particular question. All of the topics we covered today, except for the ones that I clearly made up, came directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives. These objectives contain every topic that you would be expected to know when you walk in the door of your exam. These objectives are available on the CompTIA website. They are free to download and use. This is probably one of the most valuable study materials that you will have available to you because it lists out everything that you can expect to find on the exam. Tells you a little bit of the exam, a little bit of the overview, and then directly jumps into Domain 1, Networking Concepts. Section 1.1 is Explain Concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI, reference model, and it goes through Layer 1 Physical, Layer 2 Data Link, Layer 3 Network, Layer 4 Transport, and so on. Once you understand OSI, you can go to the next section, 1.2, compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions. You need to know about physical and virtual appliances such as routers, switches, firewalls, IDS, IPS, load balancers, proxies, NAS, SAN, wireless access points, wireless controllers. We need to understand content delivery networks, or CDNs, virtual private networks, quality of service, and time to live. That's only section 1.1 and 1.2. Next is section 1.3 and so on. But notice it gives you everything you need to know. This is not a high-level overview. This is a detailed breakdown of every possible thing that could appear on your exam. How fortunate is this for us? Because this is a great way to study. Now we are preparing for anything that might come through. I mentioned earlier in our performance-based questions that the performance-based questions are not going to be in any particular standardized format, not like we normally would see with multiple choice questions. But if you know all of these topics, you have studied everything that is in these exam objectives, then you're ready for anything. You're ready to walk into the exam, and it doesn't matter how they ask the question. You'll know the answer because you studied every single topic from these exam objectives. And one thing you'll notice that in my training course, I follow every single one of these objectives as well. So you know that when you watch my course, we're covering everything listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. That makes it very easy for you to find what you're looking for. Plus, you know that every topic is covered in the videos. We leave nothing out. This is what I use as my format when I'm building the videos. So you know they're going to match because I'm using the same reference that you are to create all of my training materials. Hopefully that's something you might want to consider. If you want to get your hands on these objectives, go to professormesser.com/objectives, where I provide you with direct links and instructions for where you can find those exam objectives on the CompTIA website. It's a valuable tool, and as I mentioned before, absolutely free. We do one of these study groups every month. In this month of April, we've already done our A+ study groups. Today is our Network Plus study group. And then next week, come back on Wednesday, the 22nd, we have scheduled our Security Plus study group. If you're looking for the next Network Plus study group, we've already got one scheduled for May. I need to put this on the official calendar now. May the 13th, a Wednesday in May. We do our A+ on the 5th and 7th, Network Plus on the 13th, and even got another Security Plus already scheduled for the 27th. We kind of skipped that third week of May. Kind of an odd schedule here. We're skipping that week and waiting until the end of the month to do Security Plus on the 27th. We'd love for you to come back for Network Plus as well. And if you're ever wondering, when is the next live stream going to be? You might be watching this video 6 months down the line. You can always find out when the next live events are by visiting our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, this brings us to the end of the Q&A section where I'm asking you questions. Why don't we change this around so that you can ask me questions? You can do that at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA. And coming up next, that's exactly what we're going to do. In the meantime, don't forget about our Network Plus course success bundle at professormesser.com/netsuccess. And if you need a voucher, you can't find vouchers any less expensive on the CompTIA website. It's full price over there. Get a discounted voucher over on the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we're not here live. You'll find us over on our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. And we have our videos on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. And for social media, just look for professormesser.com/ the name of the site that you would like to find us on, /X, /Instagram, /LinkedIn, /Facebook. You get the idea. You'll be able to find us there. Well, that brings us to the end of another Network Plus study group. Stick around for the after show, which starts in just a few seconds. If you enjoyed this video, we would love it if you give it a thumbs up. And if you've been thinking about subscribing to our channel, now would be a perfect time to subscribe. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. And now it's time that I need to bring myself back on here. Let me take a sip. Yeah, the vouchers that are on our website at professormesser.com/vouchers are only good if you happen to be physically located in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. Unfortunately, we don't have options right now for other countries or other places in the world, but hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. That would be something nice to have. Now it's the time for our after show. In our after show, I like to ask, see what questions you would like to ask instead of me asking all of these questions. So that's exactly what I have for you, is a way to go through and look at all of those. So I'm going to let you know that you can submit questions for this second hour at any time. I'm going to be moderating all of these, so you can submit them in. They go into a big queue, and we'll be able to have a look and see what the different options are, what the different questions are that you have. You can submit those at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. I will be glad to see what questions you have. There are already a few questions that are coming in. I've got Q&A right here. We could start sifting through the ones that happen to be here. Something that's really good. We've got plenty there to go through. Let's go through kind of a how does this work kind of question. This is from Joe, and Joe writes, I allowed my A+ to expire a few months ago. As many of you know, when you earn a CompTIA certification, that certification is good for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, it expires. It's done. It is no more. It is pining for the fjords. There is no more certification there unless you renew it. If you were to renew somewhere in that 3-year period, it would add another 3 years to that expiration date. But if you don't go through a renewal process, there's a lot of different ways to renew your certification. In fact, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to the YouTube video description. And I have in the YouTube video description a video on ways to renew your certification in really just a few hours. But I also have other options within that same video as well. So good things to be able to work through. The question here is, though, Joe allowed the A+ certification he had to expire. It is no longer a certification. The question is, will getting my Network Plus renew my A+ certification? Well, as many of you are aware, the renewal process for these certifications can be a bit challenging. So why don't we go out to the CompTIA website and see what options we might have there. At the top of the CompTIA website is an option there for continuing education. So that's what we're going to choose at the very top under, let's see, the best place to go for all of this would be under the resources option. So let me take you to just the CompTIA website as it looks today. And at the very top of the CompTIA website is an option for resources. I'm going to click that resources option. We're going to scroll down here, and right here is continuing education. This is how we can keep our certification current. Let's learn more. And you can see there's a lot here. In fact, it even says, do you need to renew quickly? Use CertMaster CE. That's effectively the TLDR from my video. Use CertMaster CE. Well, what does that mean? Well, I tell you all about it in the video. So you've got other options in here. You can, why do you need to renew, learning about the renewal process, choosing a renewal path, et cetera, et cetera. The renewal path is an interesting one. This question specifically was about taking the Network Plus exam. Does that renew A+? So if I go into a single activity for renewal and say that I'm going to take a higher level CompTIA certification, they spell out here that for your certification, if you were to take Network Plus, there it is, it fully renews the A+ cert. Aha, there's part of the answer that we were looking for. So taking Network Plus, if you already had the A+ certification, it gets to be renewed. But important consideration here is that you can renew this configuration as long as the certification that you are renewing is still valid. If the A+ is no longer valid, if it's been more than 3 years and you no longer have an A+ certification, taking the Network Plus will not resuscitate your A+. You will not be able to regenerate your old A+ certification. It's gone. It's now dead. You're not getting it back. It's never going to renew itself. You can't renew something that no longer exists, if you think of it that way. So this is one of those scenarios where you have to be sure, if you're ever planning to keep that cert, make sure it is renewed before the expiration date of the certification. Once you are past the expiration date, you're not going to get any renewals. Even talking to CompTIA, even begging, please, oh please, can I please allow my A+ to be renewed? Nope, it's already expired. So you had 3 years to renew that cert. You had plenty of time. You could have renewed your A+ certification the day after you got it and extended on another 3 years, but you didn't. It eventually, but sometimes life happens and you forget about it and it times out. CompTIA does try to send emails out to remind you to let that, but it's sometimes difficult to do that. I get it. And sometimes your A+ goes away. If your A+ is no longer valid, if you're past the expiration date of the cert, the only way to get that A+ certification back is to take the 2 A+ exams again. Oh, sorry about that. That is your only way. Now, one benefit though, you passed it once, and ideally you've had a job in IT during this 3-year period. Maybe taking those 2 exams again is not going to be mentally difficult. It will just be financially difficult. I would hate to have to pay for those again to make that happen. But sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes that's the place we are and what we have to do. So hopefully that gives you some perspective there, how the A+ is expired a little bit more, that in those pieces of it. So a lot of people in the chat room are trying to find the objectives. So let me take you over to the objectives page just so you can get a perspective of what you would find there. If you go to professormesser.com/objectives, it takes you to this page. And this page says that the exam objectives are available on the CompTIA website under the certification exam section. You may need to enable cookies, disable pop-up blockers, or remove other filters to see this red box. This is in a screenshot of the CompTIA page. So if you go to these links that are on the left for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, you want to scroll down until you see the red box on the screen. That's what you're looking to see. So if I click on Network Plus objectives, well, I get a great ad from Google. Thanks, ad. Thanks, folks at Google. So it takes you to this Network Plus page. You're thinking, but where is it? Well, you scroll down. Hey, there's a red box. That's what you're looking for, is this red box. And it says, get Network Plus exam objectives and practice questions. If you don't see this red box, you're filtering it. So turn off filters in your browser, turn off any pop-up blockers in your browser, turn on your cookies, work normally on the network. Stop trying to block things, and this box will pop up. You put in your email address, you say, yes, I agree to whatever it is that I'm agreeing to, and you click that, and immediately it shows you the download options for your Network Plus exam objectives. So some of you in the chat were saying, well, where is it? What is the CompTIA? My website link didn't appear to have the information. No, I literally have a picture of exactly what we just did. So there it is. You'll find it by looking for the red box. That's what you want to find. That will take you to the exam objectives and give you everything that you are looking for. That might help you too find exactly what's there. I know they sort of hid it, so I had to make a picture so that you would know exactly what to do. It's kind of complicated to find the things that way. And make sure you use that process, because if you go to some other third-party website or third-party link to download the exam objectives, most of the time they aren't up to date. Go directly to CompTIA. That's where you will always get the most up-to-date set of exam objectives. That's what we were looking for. Let's see what other options we have for questions. Of course, you can submit questions at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your questions. Let's see what other questions you have in this list. So let's talk about Network Plus. Let's talk about Network Plus as it fits into the world of networking. And I'm going to try to focus on my perspective of network management, network administration, security, the things that I did when I was working in IT and the places that I went and the technologies I worked with in both the roles of network administration and cybersecurity. So this is from Mario, who says, Professor, I want to thank you so much for your help in passing Network Plus exam back in February of this year. I need an applause sign. I need an applause sound. Mario says, I'm a bit torn with my next move. I'm seeking your advice as I move forward. My goal is to become a network engineer or network administrator. Great place to start, by the way. What would you recommend? Would you recommend Security Plus or CCNA as the next cert to go after? I manage all aspects of the network at my current job. This is one where I will not have 100% the right answer for you, because I don't know you and I don't know what your ultimate goals are, although you gave us quite a bit in this message, Mario. Thank you for that. If your goal is networking, you want to know how to manage the network, configure the switches, manage the routers, understand configuration of the switches, understand setting up spanning tree and VLANs, understanding routing configuration, dynamic routing, VPN configuration, static routing, configuring link aggregation, plugging into layer 2 and layer 3 networks, and all of the complexities associated with planning and designing a layer 2 and layer 3 network, then focusing on networking seems to be the right direction. But you also have to compare that to the jobs available in your area and what they're asking for. So from my perspective, I think a lot of people naturally lean into the Cisco Certified Network Administrator certification. That is the CCNA. Cisco Certified Network Administrator is probably a good next step for people that want to do networking. But also keep in mind that having a CCNA just for CCNA's sake doesn't help you if an employer doesn't care if you have the CCNA. This is where you get into a bit of a back and forth with many people over certifications are important, certifications are not important. Experience is important, experience is not important. In reality, it's really a combination of both of those. Employers would love to see some practical experience. Employers would also like to see some type of certifications that speak to that experience. So it may be that it's a combination of things that would best position you for that next level up in your career. So I would say Security Plus or CCNA, I don't know, what are employers asking for? If you work for the federal government, you tend to see a bit more Security Plus. They're very focused on security. Security Plus tends to be their starting point. And they might also want you to have some Cisco or Network Plus certs, but they really want you to have Security Plus. Well, that might be the thing that makes that decision. Or you may be working in the private sector. And if you want to be network administrator, you want to design networks, you want to learn all there is to know about those protocols going over the network, CCNA might be the best choice, and employers might be asking for CCNA. I don't know. I don't know where you live. I don't know what process you're going through. I don't know the employers in your area, and I've not looked at the job postings. So that's what I would recommend you do. I'm going to answer your question by giving you homework. I'm going to say you need to create a spreadsheet that lists out every job in your area that has something to do with network administration or network engineering. And you want to be able to spell out in that and document in that spreadsheet what's the job, what's the role, and what company. You want to know, are they asking for any type of formal education? Maybe we'll document that in our spreadsheet. Are they asking for a particular certification or more? Put those in the list as well. Are they asking for a certain type of knowledge in an area that may not necessarily be a certification, but it would be useful if you knew how to do this? put those notes in there as well. Now do that for every job in your area that has anything to do with network engineering, network management, or network administration. Now you've got a nice database that shows you in your particular area for jobs that you really feel you are qualified for. Here are the types of things that you would find. And maybe you'll see a correlation. Maybe everybody's asking for Network Plus. Maybe nobody's asking for CCNA. Maybe everybody's asking for CCNA. We don't know. But that spreadsheet will really help you a bit and might give you an idea of kind of where things are leaning in your area, which might be a good way to set a strategy for determining what you do next. It'd be easy for me to say, oh yeah, go get the CCNA, you're done. Oh yeah, go get Security Plus, you're done. But that's a very simple response to a very complex problem, a very complex scenario that you've presented. And strangers on the internet are happy to tell you what they think the answer is, but none of them are right because none of them are you. So you have to take all of this feedback, even from me, with the proper amount of weight and make sure that it applies towards your scenario and not what I want your scenario to be. I put a lot of my history and my knowledge onto you, which may not be appropriate for where you live, what you're doing, or the jobs that are in your area. Only you can answer that question. So it is a combination of those. The good part about this, whether it's Security Plus or CCNA, neither one of those is bad, but only one of them will probably be better to position you for the next part of your career. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you the best possible strategy for leveling up in your career to go eventually where you would like to go. That's one great thing about IT, is there really is no ceiling. What do you want to do? And it will help you get there. We just need to find the best way to make that happen. Folks in the chat room are asking if I do a CCNA course. I'd love to do a CCNA course. That'd be a lot of fun. That is right in my wheelhouse. Been working with routers, switches, networking equipment. In fact, being a network expert is practically a prerequisite for getting into the world of cybersecurity, of IT security, because so much of IT security is networking. You have to be a network expert before you can even step into the world of security. There's practically all of IT security is networking, setting up multiple next-gen firewalls in a redundant configuration into a layer 3 network that's running dynamic routing protocols, maybe different dynamic routing protocols. Maybe the firewall will also be layer 3. Maybe you go get that Palo Alto network certification. Maybe that's the better choice. See, there's a lot of places you can go here. You need to pick the one that is right for you. Let's keep going through. This is really an interesting question, and it brings up a topic that we have quite literally been arguing about in our industry for, well, since there's been an IT industry. This is from Joel, who asks, I see the term network engineer thrown around a lot in training materials, job postings, and a lot of similar terms and job titles. For someone who's looking for their first networking job, is engineer a term worth looking into, or is there not really any rhyme or reason? Well, the answer to this is yes. In both cases, there is both. It is both a term worth looking into, and there's also no rhyme or reason. Both can be true. And in this case, it sort of is. I'm going to take you back. This comes up every couple of years, I think. If you were probably, in fact, we should probably, let me see if I can do a quick Google search of IT engineer, and there's always at some point an argument from an official engineering group. As you can imagine, when you get into the world of engineering, there's a good example of some of the things I'm looking at here. When you start talking about the word engineer, there is a broad study of things known as engineering that fits into the world of electrical engineering, civil engineering, large-scale operational technology engineering. These are people designing large-scale infrastructure type environments or designing technologies that are using electricity with electrical engineering. Maybe you're designing large-scale power distribution systems. These are people that have years of knowledge in college, maybe even a master's degree or a doctorate. They understand how to build bridges so the bridges don't fall down. They understand how to take electricity from a power plant and get it to your homes without losing too much of that power and keeping all of your systems up and running. Really is a very important part of our jobs that are out there and the things that need to be done today. But that's different. That's a different engineer than someone who is a network engineer. We use the same term, but it really means something different. Network engineering means designing a network and implementing a network and keeping the network up and running. So we tend to use those terms. Systems engineer is another common term. Operating system engineer. We use that engineer term. And because of that, these organizations that are civil, electrical, and those types of engineering environments where these people have studied, gotten formal degrees, they will every few years put out a press release saying, stop, IT people, stop calling yourself an engineer. You are not an engineer. You did not go to college for bazillion years. You do not build bridges. You do not build power distribution systems. You don't do any of that. You don't deserve to call yourself an engineer. At which point, the people driving trains raise their hand and go, wait a second. There are other engineers out there. Just because you build a bridge and you're an engineer doesn't mean you can't drive a train and not be an engineer. It doesn't mean you can't build a network, be called an engineer. It happens every few years. I see the press releases come out. They have a point. They're not wrong in what they're saying, but it's such a common, broad term that I think it's now just part of our terminology. It's just part of our nomenclature. It's part of how we talk when describing these roles. So if you see a role of network engineer, network administrator, network designer, network planner, network something, we're all complaining about using a word that in normal parlance, in the world of how we say things, just becomes what we call it now. Has it diminished the aura of the electrical engineer? Is the civil engineer now less civil and less engineer because now somebody knows how to plug in a network? I don't think so. I think they're doing fine with their bridge building and their electrical systems. We're pretty impressed by all of that. I started out, my degree when I started college was electrical engineering. I lasted a semester in electrical engineering and realized this is not for me. This is for smart people. I need to be over here in the business school where people are not as smart. Worked out fine for me. It took a while, took a little bit of time, but we got through it. But it's a really good example of how we think of terms and words and how they are used. The challenge with IT, and you will see this all the time, is we use different words for everything. Ouf means egg, chapeau means hat. It's a different word for everything, as they say. So this is one of those scenarios where we are using the word engineer, but we really mean someone who is able to design and manage and set up and maintain a network is a network engineer. So that's the examples that when we start working through it that are important to keep in mind and consider, is that we use that all the time. But if you talk to and look at, let's say you look at job postings today, you will see a job posting for a network administrator that looks very similar, if not identical, to a network engineer, which may be very similar and almost identical to a network designer or a network planner or a network administrator. These terms are very similar, and there's no standardization in IT. So if you're looking for, can we just all use the same words to describe the same job? The answer is no, we cannot. We won't. It's just one of those things where as humans, we're not able to do that. In fact, if you look at government jobs, they have a very specific set of terms that they use. Network engineer 3, a network designer 4. Okay, what is that? What does that even mean? And they try to list out those things. It's just a word. This is why there are some companies I've worked with in the past that they just didn't even use titles anymore. It became so ridiculous. They said, nobody in our company has a title. The CEO's card literally said, here's your name, and their title was Chief Explainer. Okay, which I get it, that The titles don't matter. The label we put on something doesn't matter. What you do and your value is what matters. Except at some point we need to know what you do. Are you the CEO or are you the guy that plugs in the network? Those are two important things to know. So that's a very good example of how the English language, or really language in general, is a little bit flexible when it comes to terms like this. You'll just have to sift through all of these job postings. And after a while, you'll start to see similarities. You go, oh, okay, analyst, engineer, planner, designer, architect. It's very similar in what they are doing. Look at the job posting, look at the job description. That's the important part of that. And I think you'll be okay. And maybe someday you'll work up to the level of a chief explainer. I think I'd rather be called the train engineer than that. It's just sort of how those challenges work. Let's get through some more questions, and we are there. We got a lot in this. Thank you for sending these questions in, by the way. Great questions in this view. This is going to be an important part of this when you get into understanding and dealing with networking. There's going to be a lot of different aspects to networking. This is one of both the greatest parts of IT and some of the challenges you'll run into is that just in networking, there are nuances to networking. You know, you would think networking, I can log into a switch, I can log into a router, I can change the configuration, I can maybe even design it. But there's also jobs where all you do is troubleshoot a network. There's some jobs where all you do is read through packet traces. There are some jobs where all you're doing is designing and sitting on calls where you're putting networks together. You're designing the network, but somebody else actually implements it. That's a job. So it's an engineering / designing / architect position. I worked in positions that were network administrator, network manager, where I was in charge of keeping the network running, keeping all of the services connected on that network. I also worked in positions of a systems engineer. Sometimes it's called a sales engineer. Sometimes it's called a pre-sales engineer. Sometimes there are post-sales engineers where I worked for the manufacturer of the equipment, specifically McAfee, Palo Alto Networks. Those companies I worked at as a systems engineer, where I would meet with people, find out what their challenges were. Well, I've got a design of a network, a configuration that would fix that problem that you're having. Here's how I would implement it. Let's do a whiteboard. Here's how we would design it. Here's where it would fit. Here's what we're stopping. Here's what we're allowing. Here's the way this works. Let's plug it in on the network. We'll see how it works with your network. We'll try it out. We'll do an evaluation. We'll let it run for a week. There, it did exactly what you wanted. How many of these would you like? That was that particular role. What was interesting about that is you were really designing an implementation of this technology multiple times a day with different customers. And you were trying to figure out what the best way to solve these technical problems was. Really a very interesting thing to do because every day is different. Practically throughout your day, different parts of your day were different. It's something that really was, from a cerebral perspective, a lot of fun, because you're able to really solve problems constantly throughout the day. And as many of us know in IT, a lot of what attracts us to these jobs is having a problem to solve. It's a quiz. It's something that's puzzling you, and you have to solve the puzzle. And solving the puzzle, you get that dopamine hit, like, oh, the network's now running. Now can I ping? The ping worked. Aha! We were able to solve the problem. There's really great feeling when you're able to make these technologies do exactly what you would want and that you understand what these technologies are doing. So I think if you're someone who is trying to work through, is it a network engineer? Is it a network architect? Is it one? Doesn't matter. Just find the jobs that are available that are asking you to do the things that you are familiar with, that you feel you can do. You can work through the rest of that. In the meantime, I think we should all be working on, how do we drive a train? That's what I would like to do. Let's drive the train. Let's keep going through your list of questions. I don't think that's going to happen in my career at this point. I think we're past the driving a train point. But it looks like fun. Looks like something good to do. Maybe make that happen. Next on our list, let's go through more questions that you have. Some good stuff here. This is sort of a question that piggybacks on the question we had earlier about finding the right job to make that happen. Damien says, I'm a former software developer. We don't hold it against you. It's cool. You're with friends. You're working towards getting your Security Plus certification. However, it would be my first CompTIA certification. How necessary is obtaining Network Plus first versus just studying for Security Plus? A lot of people jump into certifications and they have to start somewhere. CompTIA, of course, says you should get A Plus first, then you get Network Plus second, then you get Security Plus third, and then some other things. It's not a bad strategy. It's actually a pretty good strategy, but it's not for everyone. And as we've already mentioned, some employers would like you to have an A plus. Some employers would like you to have a Network Plus. Some employers don't care about either of those. They want you to have a Security Plus to begin with. And what you will find if you come to our website or you just hop in our Discord, there are a large number of people that Security Plus is their first certification. From CompTIA's perspective, there is no formal prerequisite. So there's nothing that requires you to have completed something to take your A plus or your Network Plus or your Security Plus. You can just jump into the Security Plus, take it, get your Security Plus cert, and you're done. You don't have to get your A plus. You don't have to get your Network Plus. Again, very often this is not about you. This is about the employer. It's also not about me. It's not what I think you should get. It's not about what you think you should get. It's what employers think you should get, because ostensibly you're the one getting a cert so that you can get a job or get a better job. That may not necessarily be what you are doing. You may be getting a certification just to expand your own personal knowledge of these technologies. I've done that before. I went and got Microsoft certifications because I didn't understand how this Microsoft stuff worked. So I wanted to go get a cert so that I would learn how the Microsoft stuff worked. And that is exactly what happened. And then later on, somebody said, well, how do you know all this Microsoft stuff? I got the certification. I go, you're Microsoft cert? Yep, sure am. I went and got it. It's because I didn't know how any of these things work because I'd never worked with them. This is something you run into all the time with IT. There are going to be plenty of technologies you've never touched before. That's just the nature of information technology. There's way too much for one person to know everything. And part of your career will be spending time throughout your career learning new things. You will always be learning something new. Always. That's how IT always works. Because the things that are coming down the line, well, you think back 2 years ago, did anybody even say the words AI? Now we've already been through the hype of AI. It's everything. It's solving the problem. No, it's not doing any of that. Oh, well, maybe we'll get it to do something. Yeah, in the hype curve, we're past the point of dreaming that it's going to change the world. Now we're at the point of thinking, can it do anything practical, please? Can we just get it to do something? That would be great. That's where we are right now with AI. So that's a very good example, though, of how most of these technologies are rolled out. There's a lot of hype at the beginning, and then it finds sort of its place. It settles down to where the technology finally goes, or in some cases, the technology drops right off. Anybody remember phablets? Anybody remember asynchronous transfer mode networking? It's going to change the world. We're going to connect all of our networks together using our video networks, our voice networks, our data networks. They're all going to share the same network, and we're going to send everything over 53 byte cells. What? Hold on. Wait a second. You had me right up to that point. You said 53 byte cells is how we're going to do this? Yes. And we know it's going to be 53 byte cells because some people wanted 64 and some people wanted 128. Some people wanted 32. We just all sat in a committee room and we came up with 53. How's that sound? And ATM didn't work out, as it turns out. Everybody was hyping it. Huge companies were built. 4 systems was created. Cisco had tons of ATM equipment. We were all connecting ATM networks together. And then almost overnight, they all just disappeared. We all decided ATM's way too hard, way too difficult to implement. Some cases doesn't work the way we were expecting. You know what it works? Ethernet. This is really Ethernet's gift to humanity, is every time we tried to move away from Ethernet drug us back. We don't need Ethernet. We got token ring. It's deterministic. It can self-repair itself. It is even faster than Ethernet. And then Ethernet said, how about 100 megabit? Like, oh, token ring. We don't need token ring. We need Ethernet. Same thing with ATM. We did all this ATM. The problem is congestion. The problem is bandwidth. The problem is availability. What if we just increase the speed of Ethernet and connect more of it together? That takes me from implementing $1 million solution into a $10,000 solution. Which one do you choose? And it's just economics at that point. Similar thing is happening now is that you have a lot of people looking at different technologies. Is that technology going to be a thing? Is it not going to be a thing? But we still need to know about it. We still need to learn about it. We still need to know the advantages and the disadvantages, at least up until the point that that technology finally goes away. And that may or may not happen with AI. It may or may not happen with the next technology to come down the road, or the next 2 or 10 technologies to come down the road. And there will be new technologies. There will be a new something that comes out, a new way of connecting, a new way of computing, a new way of calculating. There will be something that is the next big thing that a lot of companies will waste a lot of money investing in before they realize it doesn't actually do what they thought it would do. It's the nature of the beast. It's how it works. I don't know whether that's good or bad or indifferent, but that tends to be the way we do things. It's very driven by the need to see if it will work, but then when it doesn't, it tends to drop away pretty quickly. So if anybody wants to talk ATM technologies with me, I'm very familiar. I am absolutely trained up on the specifics of ATM, a technology that does nothing for me. So it's a very good example of how this industry tends to work. On the other hand, if you want to talk to me about CPUs and motherboards and Ethernet networks and firewalls and virtualization and containerization, some of these technologies stay around for a very, very, very long time. Learning these technologies is going to be important for your career. And very often I tend to tell people there's 2 sides to this. There's that middle, really 3 sides. There's that middle part where you sort of have the mainstream technologies. There is the newer technologies coming out where you have the latest and greatest bleeding front of the line happening right now. We're learning it as we go. We're all figuring it out because it's such a new technology. There's that side of it. There's an interesting side of it, though, in the industry that I found where the older technologies become more valuable as they get older because fewer people know about them. We're sort of losing our institutional knowledge in those older technologies, but the older technologies still exist. That happens as well. That has a bit of a shelf life on it because eventually those older technologies will drop off the face of the earth. But things like federal governments have technologies running inside of them that are 50 years old. Somebody has to know how to reboot this thing. Somebody has to know what to do when we reboot it and it doesn't reboot. That's the person we need. So those types of jobs are out there as well. I don't know that those have quite the longevity that one would hope for. I tend to think that leaning towards more of the newer technologies might be a better strategy for you. But you can absolutely study for one certification type at a time, regardless of what it happens to be. Just pick the right cert for what your employers are looking for, and I think you'll be okay. Let's keep going through your list and really work through the details of what happens to be there. I think some of you, if you're ever working through technology and trying to get technology to work for you, it seems like there's a lot going on when you first break into the world of IT. But if you start breaking things out and categorize them and put them like in their own little areas, you can really start to monitor and see what's going on a lot better. Sometimes the big companies know what the next technology is going to be. Sometimes they get it completely wrong. Sometimes you just have to rely on your own knowledge of the industry to know what is important and what is not important. Let's keep going through our list of different things. We talk about ARP in the performance-based question that we did today. It's from Andy, who asks, when I'm remoting into a computer on a different subnet, why can't I see MAC addresses on the ARP table? Also, we've been making practice questions for Network Plus. Well, maybe someday you will see a practice questions book for Network Plus. I don't tend to say either one way or the other if something exists until it is done. So from the perspective of the world, it doesn't exist until it does. So at the moment, it doesn't exist. would I like to see a network plus practice exams book in the future? I would. And perhaps there is some work being done at the moment, but it doesn't exist until it exists. So we'll just have to see what comes up with that. From remoting into a computer on a different subnet, you're asking why you can't see MAC addresses on the ARP table. Well, you got to see some. The device is communicating to some device. So there's something in your ARP table, but it won't be your ARP table, your MAC addresses on your local network. If you're remoting into a device and you're running commands on that device, then it will be the ARP table for that network that you're remoting into, not the one that's on your local network. You'd have to be in, and this is, of course, the challenge with MAC addresses, is that you can't see a MAC address once you leave your local broadcast domain. Once you hit a router, you can no longer see the MAC addresses that are on the other side because the router does not send MAC address information between networks. It stops at the router. That's why if you ever send a layer 2 broadcast, the layer 2 broadcast goes to everybody on your local broadcast domain, but it stops at the router because the router does not forward layer 2 information. Your router only forwards information based on layer 3. So that's why if you're looking at another network, you won't see the MAC addresses on your network. I've even had people say, well, I'm not going to tell you my MAC address on my network because you might hack into it. You might find a way into my network because you know my MAC address. No, I can't. That has nothing to do with the MAC address is only useful for communicating on your local subnet, or technically your local broadcast domain, which it should be the same as your local subnet as well. Those two things should be identical to each other in the best case scenario. So that's where you might want to look at MAC addresses and how they are used and how a router uses those MAC addresses, because that might help you understand more about ARP. It might also help you understand more about layer 3 if you get into the details of this. If you have a way to capture packets on your local network and then capture packets on the network on the other side of your router, and then maybe do a ping and see what the differences are in packets on your local network. Watch the ping hit your router, and then watch the ping on the other side of the router. What's different? One of the things that will be different is your source MAC address will be different on your local network than it is on the network outside of your network, on the other side of your router, because that's the way our layer 2 and layer 3 networks interoperate with each other. All of your MAC addresses stop at the router. So you can tell people your MAC addresses all day, every day. You saw MAC addresses on my local network, more than fine to give that to you. That was not a slip up. That was not a security breach. That was not a security concern at all. You knowing my MAC address has no security issue associated with it whatsoever. So not a problem. Now, if you were inside my network and you were looking for my MAC address and you were trying to maybe do some type of security breach associated with that, maybe do some type of in-band connection, be able to sit in the middle of a conversation, watch the traffic back and forth. I think that's certainly a concern, but for the most part, somebody can figure out your MAC address without you giving it to them. It's not a security feature. It's not hidden. It's not obfuscated. And in many cases, especially when you talk about things like a phone, or smartphones these days are constantly changing MAC addresses. They have a dynamic MAC address function to make things even more difficult to track from a privacy perspective. So sometimes MAC addresses change on their own, which is great for troubleshooting, by the way. This makes it so difficult when things are just changing up. Your MAC address just changed because it had a different configuration. It wanted to keep you private. Sometimes privacy can be a bit of a challenge when you're trying to troubleshoot. But that's a good example of how MAC addresses can sometimes be important. They can also be irrelevant. And from a security perspective, MAC addresses are not a security tool. They're just a way that you are able to move traffic through your network. Let's see what other questions you might have. I know we're top of the hour. I'm sort of out of time, but we're going to see if we can get more into this list. See what other things are on here. This might be a good place to start. Man says, what next generation firewall do you recommend for a home, a small office, and a corporation? I'm incredibly biased in my perspective of next generation firewalls because I spent 7 years at Palo Alto Networks. I was there during the startup phases of Palo Alto Networks. I was one of the first group of systems engineers hired there. So we were telling people in the first year I worked there, part of my job was visiting customers and just explaining to them what a next generation firewall was. At that point in the world of IT, nobody had even seen this technology before. What do you mean your firewall knows what application I'm running? How is that possible? Sure, and I can allow someone to browse Facebook, but I can prevent them from posting on Facebook. What are you talking about? Firewalls don't do that. Get out of here with your crazy firewall talk, mister. No, it really does do that. Watch. Let's plug it in. We plugged it in. Do this, do that. See how it blocked it. Like, wait a second. How did that work? That's a very good example of how a new technology emerged on the scene. Nobody understood this technology. And then we started learning about it and thinking, wow, we could do some interesting things with this. And suddenly it just became the norm. Palo Alto Networks changed the world of firewalls at that point. Older firewalls were worthless. I swapped out so many Cisco firewalls. I powered down so many traditional port-based firewalls at that point, because why would you run a port-based firewall when a next generation firewall was able to do much more, and in many cases, less expensively? This is where it gets to be interesting when you try to do this at home, a small business, a corporation. They started in the corporation side in the large enterprise, but now you can get next-gen firewall capabilities in some of the smallest firewalls in the world. There's open source capabilities now that provide a lot of that next-gen functionality in something that you can run at home. It's not a one-to-one, certainly, but it's one of those things where as the technology has progressed, as CPUs have gotten better, as the speeds of the high-end systems have increased, the capabilities of the low-end systems have also increased. So you may find that a lot of the home-based routers, home-based firewalls now have a lot more capabilities than they did in the past. I don't think we've quite hit next-gen firewall capabilities for many homes, but I know that I use Ubiquiti in my home, and my Ubiquiti firewall / router / internet connection, it is able to show me all of the applications running on my network. They don't call it a next-gen firewall, but a lot of the capabilities that I see within that device are next-gen capabilities that I was just explaining to people that the technology exists back in the day. I say back in the day, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever that was. So that's a really good example, though, of how next-gen technology really has come on strong. But these days, I love the Palo Alto Networks firewall. I think it's something that a lot of people really do like, and there are some amazing capabilities within those firewalls. But these days, a lot of the devices you can pull off the shelf, open source software that you can install onto your own hardware, have many of those capabilities already built in, or have enough CPU and resource management that you're able to layer on different capabilities. So it's very common these days, for example, for your firewall to be your IPS. We would rarely, if you even had the option today to buy a standalone IPS, do they even make them anymore? These days, they're just integrated into your router, into your firewall, because that's a perfect place to put it. And we can layer it on top of everything else without a significant performance decrease. Why not put it right there? So it's a good example of how you could do the same thing in your home with open source software. You can have a very well-established, capable firewall with a number of next-gen capabilities in it, and layer on top of that an IPS and have both of those running at the same time. Something very simple to do. There's a great task for you this weekend. Go grab some open source software, load up your own firewall, maybe load up an IPS to go on top of it, plug it into your internet connection, and see how it runs. See how that security is any different. Run some reports, see how often people are trying to attack your network, see what things you can block, what things you can allow. It's interesting technologies. Until you sit down and work with them, you really don't quite understand the scope of all of that. But once you get your hands dirty a little bit, do some labs, plug it into your network, and really start putting it through its paces, You realize what interesting technology it really, really is. Plus, you're learning about routing, you're learning about switching, you're learning about firewalls, you're learning about IPS, you're learning about plugging into a network, the public addresses, the private addresses, the configuration of it all. How do you manage it? How do you SSH into it? How do you change the config? How do you run a report? These are great skills to have, by the way. And they're skills that are portable, because what you just did on that firewall and IPS, you can apply to a WAF. You can apply to a router config. You can apply to the design of any type of network. This is a world of technology where you're constantly building, you're constantly adding on, you're constantly creating a foundation and building on that foundation so that you can then level up into the next job or the next thing that you would like to do in this world. IT is one that also gives you options. So if you're working with switches today, but then you think firewalls are interesting, you can pivot over to the firewall side and then work with those technologies. I started in career, my IT career was in remote IT support effectively. So I would hop in the car. People needed to have a motherboard replaced. They needed to have memory installed. They needed to have a printer installed. I was a remote service person. So they would stick the printer in my car. I would drive to the customer. I would pull out my cart and take the printer inside. I would unbox it. I would put it on the desk. I would plug it in. I would load the drivers. I would make sure it printed. I would go to the next one. That's what I did. And sometimes it would be a warranty repair. Sometimes it would be an installation. Sometimes it would be a number of different tasks, but I was learning every time I was doing that. Then from there, I moved up into the world of more of a corporate IT support. Corporate help desk was the position I took after that. Not really specific, just really more about operating systems, some email systems, being able to support people on the phone, being able to support them in person. That knowledge gave me enough of a foundation to move into the world of server administration, learning more about Windows, how these servers were communicating with each other. That gave me enough of a foundation to move into network administration and ultimately network design. That gave me another level to build on the foundation, which allowed me to pivot into working with Network General and being a systems engineer with their sniffer products, network management, network reporting. That was an interesting world, which then gave me a foundation that I leveraged to move into cybersecurity and working for a next generation firewall company. So it's never any one path, and I didn't plan that path. I didn't write down at the very beginning, we're going to start here, then we're going to do server, then we're going to do network, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. I didn't know where that was leading me, but I could see that there was a lot of options on the other side of that wall. I just needed to build up my foundation so I could get over that wall. And so the goal was to constantly be learning, constantly be understanding the newer technologies that were out, the way that they connected, the way the protocols operated, the way the operating systems worked with it, the way the security integrated with all of those, the Active Directory infrastructure, the LDAP, the VPNs, the encryption, the certificates, all of these things build on each other. And once you do it, you got it. Okay, that goes on my list. That goes on my foundation. Now let's learn about VPNs. More foundation. All right, now let's learn about this technology. And we just keep building it up, building it up. You can do exactly the same thing. And the more you build and the bigger the foundation gets, the more flexibility you are going to have to determine what you do next in your career, how much money you will make, the type of leverage and the type of benefits that you're going to get, and where you're going to work from. These are all important considerations. Maybe there is no pristine, there's no absolute diamond job out there, but I think you can find a lot of IT positions where you can get a lot of benefits that you would like as long as you have the knowledge, because that's the leverage employers are looking for. That's the leverage that works best with an employer, is bringing to the table something that no one else has. So if you can make yourself learn these technologies, and it really isn't making it, whenever I jumped into a new technology, it's fascinating. So if you have that same level of interest in technology, you can learn even faster and use that as a way to find the right job for you, to find the right position, one that would give you a good quality of life, a good quality of life for your family, give you the flexibility you need. You're doing something interesting and new every day, and you might even be working for an organization that's doing something that you can really understand, appreciate, and get behind. These are all things you can consider when you're starting to get into the world of IT. This might be something that would work for you as well. It's one of the reasons we do this. It's one of the reasons I've created all these courses. I put them for free on the internet because this is a chance that we can really get that first job in IT or get that better job in IT. And it's just a step away from jumping into it, learning the content, and building the foundation. Well, I think that's a good place to stop for today. Maybe this is an idea about something you've come up with or something you've thought about in the world of IT. We do one of these study groups every week or so. And if you'd like to join us for more Q&A for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, or you'd like me to answer your questions, come on back to the next one. We'd love to have you here. Come back next week. This is a Tuesday as we sit here doing this Network Plus study group now. Our next study group is next week on Wednesday, which is our Security Plus study group. That's always a good one too. We'd love for you to come back to that one. You can always find out when the next event is going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. If you like this event, you think it's been something useful, we'd love for you to give it a thumbs up over on the YouTube side. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, this will be a great time to do that as well. Make sure you come back, and we'd love to see you again on the next study group. Thank you so much for joining us this time. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.